Welcome back. In today's video, I wanted to go over an editing technique that I've learned over the last few years, and I've used it for every single project, and it's saved me hundreds of hours. This technique, I talk about it all the time, and it's called the radio edit. And the radio edit is basically editing a project from the audio first. When I first started out editing, I would usually just jump straight into the visuals. I'd be too excited to go in and chop up the best scenes, the best cuts, the transitions, yada, yada, yada. And I'd end up going through 4 or 5 iterations of every edit and then readjusting the audio, figuring out what flows well, and I just waste a lot of time. Since I started doing the radio edit, my whole editing process has sped up exponentially, and I've done a lot less versions of each project, and I've been able to output a lot more. Conceptually, if you think about the radio edit, it's basically just doing a paper edit or a previs, as people would say, basically taking your storyboards and mapping it out audio first, and then afterwards adding on your visuals and then tweaking everything to make sure it flows super well. You're probably thinking, yeah, duh, I do this too. I add my music first and then I go from there. You can't just do an edit purely based on visuals. But the radio edit is a little bit more detailed than that. Basically, you're mapping out the flow of your video and then adding visuals afterwards. Let me quickly show you 2 examples of how I use the radio edit in my workflow. All right, so this project was a Bape campaign that I did, and I'm actually doing a full breakdown on this. And basically, I just wanted to show you exactly kind of the steps that I go through before I even lay out any of the visuals here. So if you'll notice, I have an audio track here that basically is just the music here. So this is the audio track that I use for this project. So the first thing I'll do on any sort of commercial work or music driven project is I'll go ahead and just lay out my music, and I'll figure out key moments or key kind of like ebbs and flows in the music. If you'll notice here, I have 3 different markers, which breaks this song into 4 sections. I'll always look for an intro, and if you'll notice, the intro happens in the first 2 seconds. I'll go ahead and just press M on my keyboard or whatever keybinds you have set to set markers in Premiere Pro. But I'll just go ahead and select the areas that I have for major transitions. So I have one in the beginning here. There's a clear beat drop here. I've got another one later in the song. Another major beat drop here, and then this song's pretty beat heavy. So I've just gone ahead and laid out the 4 major transition points in my music piece. The next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and add risers and whooshes in whatever kind of like major beat drops that I have. Before I'm even looking at any of this visual stuff, I'm just laying out, I've got some risers here, I'll put some whooshes, and then I'll just do that at each of my major transition points here. I've got, again, a set of risers and whooshes. And then again here, I've got another set of risers and whooshes. And a lot of times I like to start and end my video projects with kind of like deep impacts and then risers at the end. So the whole point of doing this is now I have 4 major sections of my music, of my video, that I can then now go ahead and place clips that are sort of associated with each other into these sections. And then I can just time everything to the beat and figure out all the visual stuff later. But just for this video's purpose, basically now I have 4 sections where I can go ahead and add my different video clips, and it's a great organizational tool. Now, once I've added all of my clips, easily I can go in and add additional transitions here. For instance, I've got a little camera flash here that I like to add often, and you can go ahead and of course tweak this once you've laid out your major sections here. So of course, once I've laid out the major sections here and added the general risers and whooshes and transitions, then I'll go ahead and tweak it and add additional different transition sound effects like camera flashes. I'll add ambient sounds. I'll go ahead and add a bunch of additional sound effects afterwards. But this just general, really simple concept of figuring out the flow of your music, the flow of your transitions, and the flow of your sections allows you then to go ahead and place the transitions that you had based on your storyboarding and everything. And it just speeds up the entire process. You're not kind of like fiddling around and figuring out where a transition might fit best or whatnot. Here's another example. This is just a talking head video that I made for my Instagram. If you notice here, I've designed my music with this beat drop happening in the first 4 seconds. So when you have your hook, what I like to do is I like to plan and have my beat drop associated in the first 4 seconds, and then I'll have the ebbs and flows and the rest of the music, because it's not, it's not as important as the first 4 seconds or the hook of your video. But based on this, I've actually gone ahead and mapped out all of my transitions, or most of my transitions, based off of this initial beat drop. So I'll have, again, my impacts here, I'll have my risers. Very useful. I'm a huge fan of, for this project, I've gone ahead and done my music first, then I've gone ahead and attached my voiceover. Here's a trick to come up with endless transitions. It's actually super useful. I'm a huge fan of speed ramps, whip pans, match cuts, but when I want something to feel fresh, I'll write out a basic concept and ask Claude for creative variations. And for these spoken videos, I'll use the in-betweens of my VO as key parameters and key indicators of transition points. So as you'll notice here, I've actually got whooshes already kind of like pre-laid out and transitions laid out in between my key points here. And this is how you find the rhythm and flow of your videos. Then you can go ahead and add in your relevant B-roll, anything that relates to what you're talking about. And again, it's the same concept as putting your transitions on the beat drops, but basically you're just laying out opportunities for you to go ahead and add the relevant B-roll or A-roll. Something as simple as getting your music set up, and then if you have voiceover, that as well, allowing yourself to section or partition out your videos and adding in transition sound effects as placeholders, or sometimes they work often if you use the same sound effects over and over again. If you add those in and then you place your visuals, you can then go ahead and tweak the actual sound effects or whatever you use to placehold it originally and fine tune everything. And it's just so much more streamlined by making a blueprint and taking care of your audio first and then attacking your visuals and then going ahead and tweaking everything later. This just speeds up the entire process. And it's honestly such a game changer. I'm sure you probably already do this unconsciously to a certain degree, but since I've started being very conscientious and really taking this process and being intentional with it and figuring out exactly the sections and basically partitioning out your edit, figuring out where your transition or your inflection points are, and then placing your visuals and figuring out where things connect and flow. That's where this has come in super handy. I hope this quick tip helped. If you have any questions on this particular workflow or anything else in general, feel free to leave in the comments down below. Check out my LUTs, my PowerGrade, my sound effects, all available in my store. Again, that'll be linked down below. And thanks again for tuning in to the very end. I'll see you guys in the next one.